Hey everybody, so I'm sure by now you've pretty much figured out that I love pinball. I love playing the game, I love restoring the machines, I love collecting the games that I grew up with, that I have nostalgic ties to. I mean, I love the entire hobby, and even though it's been put on hold now for a couple of years, it's still something I really enjoy. But you know what? Between you and me, of all the stuff that I can do in the hobby, my most favorite thing is actually sharing it with others. In fact, I had parties all the time just so we can switch on all the games and have one big flip fest. Well, guess what? At my last two parties, the cameras were rolling. So I thought we'd take a little break here and take a closer look at one of my favorite things, and that was Bucci's pinball parties.
Say goodbye to your balls.
The Bucci's pinball parties really began in 1996. Once I got my second machine, which was the Addams Family, I now thought it'd be really cool to have some people over, maybe do like a couple of tournaments or something. And at that time, the game room was a little different. I had like a movie room set up while I was going to college here downstairs, had a little couch in the middle, and over in the back corner were my two machines. At that time, it was Taxi and Addams Family. What I ended up doing was basically inviting coworkers, friends, family to come over at Christmas, and we'd have like a little party. We'd watch a movie, we'd have a bunch of snacks, and we'd play a couple games of pinball. And so there were maybe a dozen people at first, but that's kind of what started it. And that became a tradition. Every year I would have people over at Christmas, and I'd have more and more people over as more and more friends started jumping on board. As time went on, I also started adding cast parties to the mixture as I got more games, and things shifted around a little bit because I do a lot of plays in theater. Sometimes I would host like a cast party. And then in about 2002, when I had a lot more games than usual, I started to put a feeler out there on the Pinball News Group and see if any collectors in the vicinity of where I lived maybe wanted to come down for a party. I was having one anyway. It was like a Halloween thing. And so I invited some other people to come down, and I actually got one response. As my collection grew and I started talking to more people on the internet and going to conventions and blah, 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 more people started coming over. Collectors actually started driving in from out of the state. It ended up becoming a tradition where I would have a party almost once or twice a year. And honestly, it went from like a dozen people to like 25 to like 40. I mean, it really started to grow to the point where like my very last party a few years ago, I had like almost 80 people or something like that. And it was all kinds of people, friends, family, and collectors, and it was really a lot of fun. And that's kind of the history of how the Bucci pinball parties started. My last two pinball parties were actually in 2005, and then a few years later in 2008. At this point, priorities kind of changed, and those of you know that by 2009, I pretty much was putting a halt on the hobby because I had other personal things that needed to happen, money that needed to go somewhere else, and so I kind of put a hold on everything, and that's why my collections pretty much stayed the same for the last 2.5, almost 3 years.
Ho, ho, ho! Dusty!
So what exactly is a pinball party? Well, I think the title kind of speaks for itself. Basically, all of my machines are turned on at once, the electric bill's going and everything's on free play. So all you do is you step up to a machine that's free, you press start, and you play a game, and that's pretty much it. I didn't ask anybody to really pay for anything. The only thing I said was if you could bring a dish to share or something like that, some kind of food, that would be great. And most everybody did. On the other side of the basement, I would set up tables, and basically that's where people would sit when they were taking a break or they wanted to have something to eat. And then there would be food tables along the edge of the basement, and if you brought something to share, we'd stuff it in with everything else. And then of course we'd have sodas and beer and a whole bunch of other stuff. And here's actually a very funny story. When Little Caesars began their $5 pizzas, you know, hot and ready, you go in, you grab one and you take it, I noticed that the next party I had after that began, people started bringing Little Caesars pizza. The first person brought it like 2 or 3 and we're like, that's awesome. Then the next person came in with a couple. And then the next person came in and then the next person came in. And everybody that brought pizza thought they were really cool, you know, until they looked at the table and saw these stacks of pizza boxes. Hey everybody, I got pizza, I got Oh, you have some. I can't remember exactly how many we ended up having, but there was a stack. It usually was like a 12-hour party. I mean, it lasted almost half a day. The party would usually start at like 3 o'clock. Something like that, and people would, you know, it would start kind of slow, and then slowly people would start filing in, and we did it kind of like an open house sort of thing. You just kind of showed up when you wanted and left when you wanted, and it was very, very nice and relaxed that way. In fact, up in the garage, I actually set up like a little break area where people who wanted to smoke or whatever could take a smoke break. They could even go outside. Sometimes they go out on the porch, and the break area actually became like, you know, because with all those games going and the heat and the humidity coming off the electronics and everything else, it gets really, really hot down here. And so people found going outside as a nice welcome break sometimes. The other cool thing about the break room is often a friend of mine would bring a game or something to share, and because the garage was on a level floor and everything else was downstairs, it was easier just to keep it up there. In 2005, and in fact in previous years, a friend of mine, Tom, who was more of an arcade game collector, actually brought his Centipede. And that was a big hit because, you know, up in the break room, a lot of people love that game, and that was constantly being played, constantly. My last party in 2008, my friend Bruce from Rochester brought his Guns N' Roses from Daddy East. So that was nice when friends would kind of donate a game or something for the party to bring, and it just added a little extra fun and a little bit more to the break area. So what are some other random things we'd have at the parties? Well, sometimes I would do door prizes. When people came in, they'd, you know, fill out the little ticket, and then we'd drop them in a box, and then I would draw like a winner every hour or so. I would usually find some extra promotional plastics that I might have, some extra flyers, some stuff that I accumulated that just happened to be pinball related.
Nervous that I know I'm gonna need.
I used to set up a projector that I had over in the back corner of the game room, where I had this little extra couch that actually used to be in the room and now ended up into the basement area. And I set up a little projector screen, and I actually would show like pinball promotional videos or something like that. You know, just another little break area in case somebody wanted to get away from all the noise and away from all the stuff and take a little break. Sometimes weird things would happen and people would just celebrate, you know, and I'm glad that the cameras were there to capture some of these. Like, for example, Safecracker, whenever it would spit out a token, a lot of times it would surprise people. And my friend Bruce from Rochester, he already knew what the game did. But see, his goal was to collect both of the magnets that I created so that I could trade in the tokens for a magnet. And another really cool thing is there's a feature on a handful of games by Williams Valley Williams called Midnight Madness. Basically what that entails is at midnight, if the clock in your software is, you know, correctly set, the game would literally shut down and then start going crazy, and then you'd get a ridiculous multi-ball for no reason at all. Johnny Mnemonic has it, Whodunit has it, there's a couple of other games that have it, and actually this video footage is of Johnny Mnemonic hitting Midnight Madness, and it was kind of a neat surprise. And then the balls start shooting out, and it's a crazy multi-ball. So, you know, I mean, there's some fun little weird things like that that nobody else would really care about, but it's neat to have it on film, and there's those moments that I really enjoy. For me, it's it's fun, but you know, a 12-hour party, you're running around talking to people, greeting new people, watching other people play games, and unfortunately, you're also keeping the old pinball keys handy because, yeah, you're gonna have problems. Oftentimes it's something simple like a ball hang up and it just doesn't catch loose and you could easily take it out yourself, but once in a while you have something that goes wrong, and if you have the time, you can go ahead and repair it so that hopefully the game can move on. It doesn't happen as often as you think, but it does happen. And so, you know, I find myself running around sometimes with my head cut off going, hey, wait, I gotta fix this. Oh, hold on a second. Hey, I'll be right with you. Okay, I'm gonna go there. Go ahead and grab a drink and I'll be right with you. Hey, how you doing, Jim? And then all of a sudden it's just like, oh my God, I'm so tired by the end of the night. But it's, you know what? I do it, I would keep doing it because I'm crazy. Now, I pretty much mentioned everything that goes on at a pinball party, but there's one particular thing that I did not get to, and that is probably the thing about the parties that most people, and especially myself, enjoy the most, and that is the tournaments. Now, over the years, the tournament thing has changed, but I try to do a couple of different tournaments every single party. Originally, it started off, I actually bought some trophies, and everybody would play one of each game. I think the very first one was Whitewater in a game I used to own called Creature from the Black Lagoon, and the top two highest scores, because we used to write the scores down as somebody played a game, they had one shot at it, won a trophy. And then as the years went on, I started getting game-specific things, some kind of collectible of some kind, something maybe interesting, just to make it a little different. And then I would do more tournaments and different ones. And what ended up happening is I would do an ongoing tournament, and then we would do like a novice or a one-shot tournament. In the 2005 party, the main tournaments, the ongoing tournaments, were on No Good Gophers and The Shadow. Normally, the games that I chose for tournaments were games that were new to the collection since the last party. So that way, if somebody wasn't as familiar with the game, it would almost kind of balance the playing field a little bit, since friends and people weren't over all the time playing those machines. And it was nice to actually have the newer game as something a little different than here. It's just a different game. And in the 2005 party, No Good Gophers I had just added not too long before. Same with The Shadow, of which I had finally restored up and added to the party. And so both of those were the tournament games, and I would hang little signs above each one, and that basically said whoever had the high scores at the end of the party won. The one-shot tournament, which this time I called it the Novice Tournament, was on The Getaway. I decided to do something a little different and do The Getaway. And here's an interesting thing about this particular one. Tim Ferrante, who used to run a magazine called Game Room Magazine, of which was then taken over by Kevin Steele, and actually now they just shut the magazine down, unfortunately. Tim Ferrante and I had done a little business together because he wrote a review of one of my pinball DVDs in one of the magazines, and as a result, he was selling my DVD. Well, he donated some prizes for my party/tournament. A 6-month subscription to the magazine, some Game Room t-shirts, a videotape, and a price guide, and it was really, really cool. So that was 2005. In 2008, we had one ongoing tournament, and that was on Family Guy. That was a fun tournament because a lot of the people that came over had not played Family Guy yet. It was still a pretty new Stern, hadn't been out that long, maybe a half year, a little over a half year, and people really seemed to enjoy trying to play Family Guy and getting used to what to do on it, you know. In 2005, yeah, I got The Shadow and Gophers, but those weren't new games, they were just new to my collection, you know what I mean? Where Family Guy was still a pretty new machine on the market in general. And so basically the top 3 highest scores at midnight won. And actually here's a copy of the sign, which is still hanging in the game room because I never actually took it down. And of course I had a bunch of Family Guy related stuff in order to give away, including an Evil Monkey hat, which everybody really seemed to like, and a couple of other things. So that was a lot of fun. So Family Guy was that tournament. The one-shot tournament we did a little different this year. Instead of calling it a novice tournament, I called it a one-ball tournament, and that was on Taxi. And there were a lot of people participating in that particular tournament, and that worked out well because, again, 2008 I had the most people ever, and so it kind of expedited things a little bit by doing a one-ball tournament. And if you've ever played Taxi, you know that the ball times on that game are usually pretty short, because the ball is pretty unpredictable in that one. There's no ball saver, and you can literally hit a drain right after the ball kicks itself out. And so the games went really quick, to put it simply, and almost everybody who was at the party got a chance to participate in it. The list on that erase board from the Taxi tournament was long. And it was cool because I had these little Hallmark ornaments that were taxi cab ornaments, and I literally had them for years, and I planned on giving them away at a Taxi tournament at some point. I just never got around to doing the Taxi tournament, and now I was able to give those away. That was really cool. So that's pretty much the tournament setting at my parties. People really seem to get into the spirit of it. The more expert and above average players like the ongoing tournaments because they can compete in those a little more. The novice or average player like the one-shot tournaments, everybody kind of gets a chance to win something. And I enjoy, again, just enjoy seeing people have a good time. The tournaments are a lot of fun. So that's the Bucci's Pinball Tournaments. Obviously, before a party begins, I would go around and try to bulletproof the games the best that I can. I usually would clean them off, wipe them down, check the bulbs, make sure everything's working, so that way, over the course of a 12-hour party, hopefully they wouldn't mess up too often and people could enjoy the games. And it was a lot of work before, just like it was a lot of work during, but totally worth it. So what specific games would you find at these parties? Well, obviously, any game that I currently own that is up and running is something you would find on and ready to play. But sometimes there would be some other games that maybe you weren't expecting. Now, I obviously already mentioned that friends would often bring something for the break room. And obviously, if you're watching some of the older footage that I put on here, you'll notice some games have changed hands, obviously, over time. Games that I used to own no longer own anymore. But there were a couple of games that once in a while would be part of the party that maybe weren't necessarily part of either collection. A lot of times I've had project games or something that was in the works to be fixed, that was semi-working, that if it was up and running at least a little bit, I would go ahead and toss that into the party too. Like, for example, here's some footage in the corner of a game called Red and Ted's Roadshow, which was a game that really wasn't part of my collection. It was a project game that I was working on. Now here's some footage from the 2005 party. Notice here, this is an F-14 Tomcat. This is a game that was a project game I had planned on working on, but I wasn't really happy with the quality of the machine, so in the end I ended up selling it to someone else who was interested. That's a game I definitely want to get someday, but I want to get a one that's a little nicer. But what was cool about F-14 Tomcat, if you look at the top, it literally has 3 beacons. And when those lights go off, especially in a small basement, it lights up everything. I actually went outside and looked in through the basement window just to see that thing flash, and you could see it just illuminating through the basement window. Normally I would put a sign up that said this isn't completely working or whatever, but there you get an idea of kind of the way that goes, and really what games would have been available. You know, at the time I tried to throw in anything I could, really. So there's a little glance into the Bucci's pinball parties. I'm glad that I got to utilize that footage and got to share it with all of you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.